Good morning. Hello. Right. Hands up if you've ever had a great manager. I don't mean a good manager, I mean a great one. One that really, really focuses on you, they understand you, they really, really support your development. That is brilliant. Loads of hands going up there. Now, hands up if you've ever had a bad manager. The ones that are the total opposite. The frightening thing is there's always more hands for that second one. Now, I just want to ask you a question. Which of those questions would you want your teams to raise their hands to? I'm hoping it's the first one. And what I'm going to share with you today is one simple thing that will help managing your people and make that an easier thing for you to do. And it's such a simple step. You won't believe that it can make such an impact. But it can. And I'll tell you why. But before I do, I'm going to tell you, I'm Helen Joy, and my mission is to make and create and develop as many great managers as possible in workplaces around the world. I'm going to tell you why I'm so passionate about this particular area. When I was 19, I went into the workplace, I went into insurance, very dull, but I was ambitious. I got on really well, people liked me, I liked people, I learned, I was really, really interested in what happened within the business. And somehow I managed to get offered a promotion to a management role. Now, I'd been there a couple of years. I wasn't 19 here, I can't find any pictures of me at 19, but I basically looked pretty much the same, just a bit bigger and with a better haircut. Debatable, it was the 90s. But there I was, I mean, look at her. So at 21, I was asked if I wanted to manage a team of people. Now, this team of people was incredibly experienced. They had about 200 years worth of experience between them. I mean, they didn't. They were probably average of about 35, but I was 21, so they all looked ancient from where I was sitting. And I had to think about it. But what I decided was I was ambitious. This was going to be my first step towards the future that I wanted for myself. And clearly, I was supervising the team I was in at the time, so clearly I was doing a really good job, so I was going to be fine. And there was £500 a year extra in it. 21, that's important. Now, on that Monday morning, I took my box and I crossed this massive open plan floor and I sat down and I smiled at this group of people who were all sitting, staring impassively back at me for what felt like hours. And then eventually one of them got up and did the tea round, because this was the Northwest in the 90s and nobody drank coffee. But they didn't ask me what I wanted, they just looked at me, carried on and got on with their day. Now, it went from bad to worse. They had no respect for me. And to be honest, understandably, they knew their jobs better than I did. They knew my job better than I did. But I was there. They were stuck with me. Now, it went from bad to worse and worse. And I didn't really know what to do. So I'd have to deal with underperformance. I'd have to deal with lateness, things like that. And they were just rude to me, or they ignored me. And I didn't know what to do in that situation. Nobody had ever told me, how do you deal with horrible people at work? Because I was 21. I had no idea. After 3 months of me going home crying on the way home every night, because I really, really hated it, my boss came to me and said, you've got 3 months. If you don't improve and turn this team around, you're going back to your old job. And not to the supervisor role, but actually back to part of this team. And I had a bit of a foot-stamping 21-year-old tantrum at that point because that was not fair. I didn't know what to do. But I went home, had a bit of kind of talk to myself and said, right, what can I do to turn this around? And I went in the next day and I asked my boss for some help. And I shouldn't have had to ask, really. But even now, 58% of new managers don't get any management skills training in the first 18 months of their job. So that hasn't changed. They were brilliant, in fairness. They gave me a mentor. They gave me a budget for books. They booked me onto a training course in London 3 months down the line, which gave me the confidence that they believed that I could actually do it. I mean, look at her, she doesn't look like a monster, does she? To be fair, I probably was. And I turned it around. It took slightly longer than 3 months, but I was determined. I was going to change how I behaved, and that was going to change how they behaved, and it worked. It took longer than 3 months, but by the end of the year, when I was promoted again, I have no idea how. Clearly, they were short of people in that industry at that time. But I got promoted again at the end of the year, so I clearly turned it around. But there was one thing, one particular thing that I can put it down to that worked for me then, worked for me with every team I've managed ever since, and has worked for people that I work with on my training teams, and it's this one thing. It's called managing expectations. Okay, it's that simple. Some of you are looking at me going, oh yeah, of course it is. Some of you are going, what? But it is that simple. Because we all come to work with a whole host of unmet, unspoken needs and things that we just assume are the way that things work. And that's how things are going to happen. And when those are met, everything's happy, everyone's great. But if those unmet needs aren't, or the unspoken needs aren't met, then what happens is that people get demotivated, they get disengaged, they get disheartened, and they step back and step away from the business. And so really, really simply, by meeting that expectations gap, that is exactly how you actually turn things around with people. Now, there's a thing called the psychological contract. Anyone heard of the psychological contract? Brilliant. And effectively, it is that we have, it's like your employment contract, but it means that we've got all the intangible things that we don't actually think about. And quite often, people come to you and they've been through recruiters, they've been through people interviewing them who've told them this amazing place that they're going to work at. They have sold them the dream. And then they get to you because they've glossed over the reality of what it's like to be in a workplace. And there are 3 elements to managing expectations. The first one, that's your positive psychological contract, and that's your negative psychological contract. We get all of these positive things. We get happy people with a positive psychological contract. And with a negative one, we get dissatisfaction. Eventually, people leave. So 3 elements to psychological to the managing expectations. The first one is your own. When's the last time you sat down and you thought about, what are my expectations in the workplace? What do I expect from my boss, from my team, from myself and from my employer? And are they being met? Because quite often problems in the workplace come from ourselves. They're our own expectations. Secondly, what about your manager's expectations? When's the last time you sat down with them to find out what it is that they're looking for and what they want? And thirdly, and most importantly, is your team. Because we all have expectations of the members of our team that we never ever express. I've got a client who was complaining about her team, and what it came down to was the fact that they weren't emptying the bins on the days the cleaner didn't come. And I said to her, have you ever told any of them you expect them to empty the bins? No. And you're getting really wound up about that because you think that they're doing that on purpose. They're not. They just don't know that that's what you want them to do. And when you stop and when you sit down with your team and establish what it is that they expect from you, you can do one of 2 things. If they match, if your expectations and their expectations match, everyone's happy. But if they don't, what you can do is then manage or mitigate those expectations. Because when you do that, that trust is created and it's creating that positive psychological contract. So when you've got that, everybody's happy. Because even if you can't do what they want you to do, if you're meeting them halfway and they understand why, that creates that positivity. So if I can ask you to do one thing after today, is find someone that you work with and ask them what their expectations are of you. Because you might be surprised. And if you are, you can work with that. Thank you.